Hello and welcome back to Chaotic Insights, where today I break down the TV show Chaotic and we're going to be talking about episode 39, Eye of the Maelstrom. So grab a snack, start your laundry, and let's dive right in. Episode summary. The lights at Lake Kenepo look spectacular, so Nadrin knows something's wrong. Danger is afoot. Nadrin uses the Song of Future Sight and says that the danger could destroy the power of music forever. Then we get the theme song and a drum match with Peyton as Maglax against Arias in Kiru City. And Peyton wins, but Tom missed Peyton's match because he's been camping out at Lake Kenepo trying to get a scan of Nadrin. Nadrin then departs from Lake Kenepo and Tom tracks him west across the overworld. Nadrin then confronts Tom for following him, declares that he'd never let a chaotic player scan him, and then recruits Tom for help. Tom then ports to the Maelstrom lands to warn a group of Mepedians of an oncoming underworld ambush. But he's too late. The Underworlders successfully ambush the group and steal the music that they were carrying. Tom calls for backup and his friends help recover the music. Then Sobjack offers the music to the Eye of the Maelstrom and the storm calms. As Tom has continually proven his trustworthiness, Nadrin grants him the ability to scan him. And that's our episode. Tom gets a scan of Nadrin. Now on to analysis. This episode tonally feels a lot more serious, and the adventure has a lot more of like a grandiose quality to it. And I think you can attribute a lot of that to the score, but also like the location choices really limit the color palette in terms of it's dark, it's moody, we get flashes of lights, right? But it totally feels a lot more serious. But I think you can also attribute some of it to the way that this episode establishes its stakes. So the whole first section before the theme song, the purpose of that is exposition. It's to establish the stakes of the episode. We learn that when the sky lights up, that means there's danger. But what is the danger? Well, we get the foreshadowing with the Song of Future Sight, and these visions are differentiated with this white vignette, visual storytelling medium. And we get these lines that explain that the power of music is what is on the line, right? What are the stakes? If things go wrong, all of music isn't going to work anymore. And these stakes aren't just like normal stakes, like, oh no, I'm going to lose a match. This is like world defining stakes. And so I think the stakes are very grand for a chaotic episode, and it adds to that grandiose large scale adventure that we're going on, right? Because it's not just threatening the status quo, it's threatening the rules of the world. And so that's pretty big when all of music is on the line. And this episode also takes time to slow down and build these moments brick by brick. Bold and dramatic tone. It really lets it breathe. And so I think that pacing strategy also helps this tonally feel more serious and grand. And now we also get help from the Mepedians to establish these stakes because they have this line of even their enemies wouldn't attack them because there's too much at stake, right? End quote. And for a mission to be that important that even your enemies wouldn't sabotage it, you know, it adds to, the level of importance of this mission. That's kind of how this episode establishes that this mission in particular is important with, a serious tone and serious music and establishing stakes that threaten the entire world, not just a character or an episode. Another thing I want to point out about this episode is the Tom characterization. So, in this episode, Tom, many of his attributes are on display, right? It's a Tom episode through and through. We really emphasize his stubborn qualities, right? He hasn't left Lake Kenepo in 2 days because he's determined to get a scan of Nadrin. And he's so stubborn that the fact that Nadrin left isn't going to stop him, right? Tom is going to track him down. So we get that stubborn, resilient quality, but we also emphasize some of his noble qualities, his willingness to help with no promise of reward, his willingness to put himself in danger to keep each other safe. And so this is an episode that really, I think, shows off his character in a nice way. Now, is this episode a character piece? No. But I think the way that it's constructed really lets Tom's personality shine. This is Tom's episode. So let's move into lore. The first thing in lore that I want to talk about is Lake Kenepo. So of course we learn that the sky lights up with the aurora borealis-like lights when something's in danger, when danger is brewing. And this seems locationally specific, right? It seems like a specialty to this location. And this episode really wants us to learn that information because they use what? The rule of three. It's in the opening with the establishing shot, and it's in the beginning with Nadrin, and Tom mentions it, and Sarah mentions it. So there's multiple times when they really shed a light on, wow, the lights are bright at Lake Kenepo today, and either connect it to dangers brewing or we connect it to the plot itself, right? They really emphasize, they really want you to learn this. Of course, I have questions, right? For example, what threshold of danger signals Lake Kenepo to light up? Like, if I'm about to stub my toe, is that enough danger for Lake Kenepo to light up? Or does it have to be like world altering, life threatening danger for the sky to be that beautiful? And how does it decide, right? Is it like a sliding scale? Like, if I'm about to stab my toe, it just like, it just twinkles. But if the world's at stake, it really glows. These are, a question I have. And also, how does it know? Is it detecting all of Param? Is it like overworld specific? I have questions. And of course, we know Nadrin lives here at Lake Kenepo, so he has that kind of insight, immediacy of if the lake lights up, he knows that there's danger. And I know we've talked about his freaky wizard magic before, but this episode I think really grounds it in like a telekinesis level. Of course, he has other abilities, right? But that's not really special. All creatures have some sort of other ability because that's the mechanism of the world. Creatures can do attacks. But Nadrin's on another level, and his other level is telekinesis. And a lot of his abilities in this episode specifically are telekinesis related, right? Like levitating, flying, lifting up Tom and Peyton, moving the floating music around. They all kind of come back to that telekinesis state. Now, there is the moment where he has long, stretchy arms, but I don't think that's original to Nadrin. I think that's an attack that he just uses to his advantage. But we get some insight on Nadrin, and specifically that he has quite the collection of music that he keeps like levitating in the air. But we also learn that Nadrin purposely does not let chaotic players scan him because it's dangerous. And Nadrin just knows too many secrets, and if a chaotic player decides to tap into his memories, they could discover information that maybe they should not know or others should not know, right? It's dangerous to maybe them because maybe they'll have dangerous information, or it's dangerous to others because it could spread and then their enemies, right? Information is dangerous, is what Nadrin says. And frankly, I'm surprised that at the end of this episode, Nadrin lets Tom scan him, right? It's set up as like that's his goal, and so Tom achieves his goal for this episode. But that's really like goes to the wayside. It's really like kind of feels like B C plot when our A plot is having these Mopedians traverse the dangers of the Eye of the Maelstrom. And okay, the other thing is when Tom scans Nadrin, Tom hasn't, he makes this like there's kind of like a loose promise of like, yeah, I won't tap into any information that I'm not supposed to know, right? But Nadrin definitely does have information that Tom's not supposed to know. And this is like semi-spoilery, but like some of the information that Nadrin has like could cause some temporal paradoxes with Tom, and that's like all I'll say about that. The future of the show, where we go, it's not really impacting this moment right here. And so in a long-term canonical stream of events, right, this still makes sense, but we're teetering on like Was this a good decision, Najarin? I don't know. At this point, Tom has proven himself so many times that, like, Najarin trusts him, right? Don't look at anything you're not supposed to in there. And that's all I really have to say about Najarin. So let's move on to this offering, right? We learn that the Eye of the Maelstrom is like a storm, right? And we learn all these things, but I think we have to take it through a grain of salt because who's our main narrator in this episode? Or not narrator, but who do we get the most explanation from? It's Peyton, right? He like puts into words what's happening. So we get all this visual information that kind of correlates with what he says, and we, take it as truth and we put it together. But I don't know if Peyton's the most reliable narrator because, he doesn't have this information firsthand. He heard it from a player at Chaotic, or he's talked to somebody, right? He's not a primary source, he's at least secondary. But Peyton says that the Eye of the Storm is a portal that connects to the Kafka, and that they have to keep it open, or else all of the music will be out of tune. Now, this part of the story can kind of be corroborated by Nadrin because he said that the danger could destroy the power of music forever, right? And so, like, that's pretty much the same story. If the portal closes, if this danger happens, music is at stake for the world of Barum, right? So that makes sense. But, is music being out of tune means it doesn't work? That's kind of blurry. But also, we know that Peyton goes on to say, each year a new tribe will make a new music and make it as an offering or as a sacrifice to keep the portal open, right? And we establish that there's a tradition here. We establish that music can be created and that each year somebody makes a new one and they offer it to the storm. And that it works, right? We see that with our eyes. We see that the storm accepts this new music and it like dissipates, it calms. And so that's something that we can keep true. So, right, we kind of have this story from Peyton. We're not sure if we can trust the finer details, but we know that we can trust the broader story of, there's this tradition and the storm calms, right? And if it doesn't, we don't really know the effects, but the, projected effects would be that music wouldn't work anymore. It's kind of like this source of mystery, right? What is the Kafka? Well, we had a map to it. Well, that map burned up. And we have the story of, one tribe had it and then got greedy, or another tribe had it, and, right, there's this mystery surrounding what the Kafka is. So if this is a portal to the Kafka, right, then this portal is also surrounded in mystery. What is the Eye of the Maelstrom, if you will? What is it? And we don't know. It's like introduced here, but we don't really learn anything. But we do. Like we learn what we learn, but we don't really learn everything. We learn some things. Where this portal goes, how it got here, why it needs music to stay open. All of that kind of remains as a mystery. And personally, I think this is one of those episodes that is just like exposition for a narrative arc that maybe we never come back to, right? Unfortunately, the show got canceled, and so we couldn't, do everything that they originally planned. But like the episode with the green goo creature in Prexor Chasm, the first episode like introduces the concept, and we haven't come around to like finish it out yet because we come back to it in season 2. So I feel like the Eye of the Maelstrom is one of those things that like we introduce the concept in this episode, and this just feels like exposition for a larger story, for something we're going to learn later. And things we learn, there are other locations from the Dawn of Pack specifically that, hold secrets that are yet to be unfurled, right? So why would the Eye of the Maelstrom be any different? I look forward to seeing what secrets that maybe it holds. And you can theorize all you want, I can theorize all I want. I don't have any super strong headcanons right now, like, what is it? Why is it here? Um, what secrets does it hold? I'm not really sure. I don't have any really strong working theories because all I have is this episode. But I want to know if you do, right? What could this be? What could the next episode be a storyline of? And why does it set this and why does this set that up? These are questions I have for you. What do you think? But something I do want to point out is that when Subject sacrifices the music, there's no musician sacrificed with it, right? Like he doesn't cast the music. The music is just kind of like whisked away, it levitates off. And that's information that makes me wonder, what does that mean? Same with it being the interlude of consequence, right? This is a new music they just made up. And I don't remember this music being important later, so why highlight it now? And could it be important later, or are they just like using this opportunity to market, we have a new card and that's the interlude of consequence? But, right, so that's interesting. But the no magician thing, right, he didn't cast the music. And that makes me wonder. Because, right, there's kind of this separation between music, the item, right? Like they're old, some of them are old, they're ancient, they're found in mines. And then music as like a spell, the mystical aspect to it, how are those connected, right? It's connected through music, and it's connected through like the wizardry of the muses, like there's ancient texts, but there's also the ability to make new ones, right? We have this old and new thing. I don't know, but then, you need a musician. What is a musician? And why does a character need it to cast a music? These are questions that we don't have the answer to. And I think maybe things that the second half of this episode would answer for us. Finally, I want to also address that this tradition actually establishes like a cultural significance for the world of Param, right? It establishes a tradition that unifies all four tribes, which feels unique because there are very few things that all four tribes agree upon, but this is one of them. They agree that like providing a sacrifice to the Eye of the Maelstrom is important. And why the Underworlders try to disrupt that, I don't really know. We don't get that motivation in this episode. We know that Krek is there, so like we could theorize that it's connected to Von Blut, but Salvar is also there, and so he's more connected to Kaor. Like it really is just kind of this ambiguous group of Underworlders that show up and cause mischief. And, that's another thing of like, if we got a second part to this episode, I think maybe they would explain the motivation behind why these underworlders are trying to get rid of music. Don't they benefit from it? These are my questions. Now, more lore we get is from Mepedians, right? The Mepedians make this comment that they have some friends in the overworld, but not even their enemies would attack them due to the importance of this mission. And the alliance ship here kind of confuses me because, right, these Mepedians trust Nadirin, but Jad, he doesn't trust Maxor or Tom from, back in the day when they did Castle Brodrin, right? Tom and Maxor were teamed up, and so Jad remembers that, and he doesn't trust either of them. Now, I get that, like, you know, you gotta evaluate who you trust, and they trust Nadirin, but, like, Nadirin is friends with Maxor, and Maxor is friends with Tom, and Tom is friends with Nadirin, right? They kind of seem like a little coalition here, and so I guess like Maxor is more of like the establishment. He is the ruler of the overworld, versus Nadrin is more outside the establishment. He is just old and wise, and he's more of a sage advisor, and he has Param more at the forefront of his mind, whereas Maxor typically has the overworld more at the forefront of his mind. And so I can see why, maybe we trust somebody who oversees Param at large versus we have less trust for somebody who is like, a rivaling tribe and has their like tribe at the forefront of their mind, right? Like I can see the differentiation there, but the lore we get here is that, Mepedians often align themselves with the overworld, but not all of them. And that's interesting. That's a little nugget of information that we get. Some other things. Maglax is electromagnetic. That's fun. He's a magnet, and he can reverse that polarity. And we also get some scanner lore, right? The scanner can be used as a magnifying glass and a compass. And Tom either has a really good sense of direction or Param has some sort of map that Tom can determine which locations are west of him. And we learn that the Maelstrom lands are west of the grassy plains, which are west of Lake Kenepo. And we can also confirm that chaotic players can port with Param objects once again, because Kaz ports, this time with a music. and that feels important to note. So just other fun facts and other notes. The framing at the start of this episode I thought was particularly funny because we have four like establishing shots that continually like zoom in. We get an establishing shot of the location, and then we have a wide shot of the section of the building, and then we get a full body shot of Nadrin and his guest, and then we get a two shot of Nadrin and his guest. But like we get these four shots in a row that just like keep getting closer and closer and closer, and it draws out the pacing and establishes the world. Right, I understand why they're there. I just think it's a funny like sequence of this is how we're this is how we're zooming in is by focusing in on our shots. My other note is the guest that Nadrin has. So in the Chaotic Wiki, it says her name is Katarin, and she shows up in other episodes, especially in season one, but she never got a card for herself. I think there was some character artwork in an episode, like she might have been used in somebody's deck, but she doesn't have a physical card or a digital card. So that's interesting. Other notes on the menu today, we have Toxis tamales, and this episode really highlights, I would say, three tribes. We get the overworld locations, we get Nadrin as a protagonist, and then we get to display a group of Mepedians and highlight some Mepedians that don't usually get the spotlight, right? Sobjack, or, I'm going to butcher his name. Ublagun. I don't know. But he's the one with like the bat ears that can fly, right? I don't think he's been spotlighted before. And, it's a marketing thing. We get to see these characters in the TV show. And so when you pull the card, you connect with that and you go, oh, I remember him. And then, of course, we get this underworld trio. And so I like to note this because it seems like Danians are always kind of getting the short end of the stick narratively, but also like Danians seem pretty relegated to their own world. Like they kind of exist in Mount Pillar and we don't see them anywhere else except for the drones. And so like we see overworld and underworld mixing quite often with the underworld raids, with, Maxor versus Kaor, with Maxor versus Von Blue. We see them interacting in Param pretty often. And then we get, overworld Mepedians here and, underworld Mepedians here. We get kind of that crossing, or Slurk and Tian, right, overworld Mepedian. But Danians get the short end of the stick. They just, they're in Mount Pillar and that's where they are. And so I think that limits their ability for this kind of marketing aspect of it of, oh, seen them in the show. Now I like my card more. I like what card I pull because I recognize them. There's kind of less of that because we have less opportunity for these Danian focused stories. With that, my final thoughts on the episode are I kind of ate this episode up this time. I've always liked this episode, but it feels like such an island narratively because it doesn't connect to any other episodes. And that's why I feel like it's like the Blight episode or, one of those episodes where this is the exposition for another episode. Like this, we just never got the chance to return to this kind of concept and dig deeper into it. And I like how we get to highlight Mopedian creatures. This episode makes me like Sobjack, and it gives him some dignity as a Muge. And I suppose this episode does set up Tom to have an Adrin card in the future, and, we'll see him use that soon. But, it feels very isolated as an episode. This feels very standalone in tone, in scale, you know, and an experience, Well, in all, that's how I feel about it. Like, I feel good being in the world, exploring these new locations, but, the more serious and grandiose tone makes me feel more serious and grandiose. I don't know. It makes this episode stand out in a way that other episodes don't. And so with that, I generally like this episode, but thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time for the grand finale of season one. Oh, this is exciting. Yes, I'll see you next time for the season one finale. Oh my gosh. Bye.